So in the room, I understand we have largely residents. Is that right? And the med students. So if you're a resident, raise your hand. And med students, raise your hand. Okay. And faculty and staff. Okay. Awesome. Well, thanks for coming. You'll see 3 more of my colleagues over the coming few weeks, and they'll talk about other aspects of our program. And for whatever reason, it's not working. So neither is this, but this is. Okay, so what are we talking about with respect to opioid use disorder? Well, let's first unpack what are we talking about with respect to substance use disorder, okay? So substance use disorder, about 20 million people out of the 250 or so in the U.S. So about 7.5%, and then you can see how it breaks down. Alcohol use, illicit drugs generally, marijuana, and down the list. So this misuse of prescription pain relievers plus heroin will get you up to around 2.5 million people that suffer from opioid use disorder. And then there are some more here and there. Okay? So it's just a Venn diagram basically illustrating what's going on with respect to substance use disorder, as well as people with, so on the left is alcohol use disorder only. So this big yellow thing is alcohol use disorder only. This is illicit drug use disorder, and then this in the middle is the combination. That's about 2.3 million. And then this is mental illness on the right, about 36.4 million just with mental illness, and then substance use disorder on the left, and then in the middle about 8.2 million. And I put these slides in there just to give you a frame of reference for how big the problem is. And also because as family medicine docs, you're going to see a lot of co-occurring disorders, right? There are going to be all kinds of people presenting to you with depression, anxiety, and often what will happen is people will have been using opioids and other substances as a poor attempt at treating their own mental illness. So that's just for frame of reference. So of the 20.5 million Americans older than 12, about 2 million had a substance use disorder involving prescription pain relievers, and about 600,000 involving heroin. About 23% who use heroin develop opioid addiction and move on into addiction. So there is such a thing as people dipping into and out of heroin use. And you guys know about overprescribing and how many pain pills are out there, I'm certain. But what you may not know is that 4 in 5 new heroin users started out misusing prescription painkillers. All right, so this is the definition of opioid use disorder. It's going to be tough to read. I'm going to go through a couple of highlights, okay? That's just a few highlights. So definition is a problematic pattern of opioid use leading to clinically significant impairment or distress as manifested by at least 2 of the following occurring within a 12-month period. And so you just go down the list, right? So, opioids are taken in larger amounts, persistent desire, lots of effort, unsuccessful efforts to cut down, a lot of time is spent trying to obtain them or use them or recover. There's a failure to fulfill a major role. This is straight out of the DSM 5th edition. Tolerance and then withdrawal. So these are things that you know about, but I just wanted to cover the definition of what we're talking about with respect to OUD. I'm going to use a couple of acronyms: OUD, OPR. Anybody know? Opioid pain reliever, right? MAT, medication-assisted treatment, which is broken down into 3 types. The full antagonists of Vivitrol, right? The partial agonists of buprenorphine or Suboxone, and then the agonist methadone. So I made these slides. This one yesterday. This particular pairing has made the rounds for a while when red equaled greater than 20, okay? The problem's gotten so pervasive that this counties with greater than 20 per 100,000 that died of overdose, when that map looked mostly red. So the CDC adjusted their colors for the heat maps and went up to 30, greater than 30 per 100,000. But I draw your attention to this fact. In 2003, there were 2 places in the country that had overdose death rates of greater than 30 per 100,000. One of them was McDowell County, and one of them was Rio Arriba County in New Mexico. It's a large county. This is one county. It's 44,000 people live in that massive space. And about 22,000 people live in McDowell County. Actually, in 2002, that was the case. In 2003, this is the first time there were 2 counties that were contiguous that had overdose death stats higher than 30 per 100,000. That's why I made this image on the left. Now, that many counties. I started trying to count them last night, and there were just, trust me, more than 100. So at this point, we have incredible overdose death rates in the nation, and it has drawn a lot of attention to the problem. And I think that we're finally trying to do something about it in a comprehensive way. Finally, because it has taken a long time to get here. I'll say this about McDowell County. McDowell County doesn't just have an overdose death rate of higher than 30 per 100,000. Their overdose death rate, anybody want to guess? 60? Higher. 90? Higher. The national average is per county is 14.7. National average 14.7. In McDowell County, West Virginia, a place with just 22,000 people, there are basically per year 100 adjusted for population. The rate is 141 per 100,000. So it's the highest in the nation. So some colleagues at Pitt College of Public Health basically started modeling all this out. They showed, hey, this looks like it may be exponential. And if it's exponential, we might be able to predict it year to year. And sure enough, they did a log transform on that exponential curve for the national stats and found a good fit for 37 years, 9% average increase per year with a R-square of 0.99. And that means that for the next couple of years, we're going to be able to predict with pretty great certainty what's going to happen, unless things go pear-shaped. And guess what? They're turning up. It's bizarre. Last year, we had 64,000 people die of overdose. It looks like there'll be about 300,000 people in the next 5 years that pass away. It took 15 years to get there. So we had 15 years before we saw 300,000 people die of overdose. And in the next 5, we'll have the same. So the same colleagues did an analysis about just a couple of Appalachian states, and showed basically, and these are numbers. This is not a rate anymore. This is it's deaths per year. Okay, Ohio and Pennsylvania have huge numbers at this point. Just the populations are much bigger than Tennessee, Kentucky, and West Virginia. The rates in West Virginia are the highest, but Tennessee and Ohio, Pennsylvania have the highest numbers. Has anybody heard of the diseases of despair? The Case and Deaton study, basically that showed that middle-aged whites were actually doing worse than anywhere else, and basically driving up mortality rates in the U.S. And in fact, this is just a screenshot from their paper in 2017 that showed how poorly folks in the U.S., white non-Hispanic folks in the U.S. were doing relative to these other countries. And I just point that out to just to illustrate, everything was going along fine, and then right when we begin to see an uptick in this overprescribing, overconsumption problem, which is one of the diseases of despair. That really refers to a deaths by drugs, alcohol, or suicide. Then it began to increase dramatically. So the disease of despair it's in the popular media at this point. This was a Brookings Institute study, and it's pretty dense. I could have pulled a lot of information out of it, but I recommend it if you're interested, and it's fascinating reading. It's tightly correlated with poverty, lack of education, and labor force participation rate. Okay, so if you're not able to work, or you're on disability, or you choose not to work, and you're not looking for work, those things are all highly correlated with this increase in mortality. They did an Appalachian version of this, and effectively showed that the diseases of despair mortality rates in Appalachia were statistically significantly different from non-Appalachian rates. And you can see the blue line is Appalachia compared to non-Appalachia. And then these are so this is a better one, actually. This is the disease of despair in total, and then this is overdose, suicide, and then alcoholic liver disease. And about 8% increase for alcoholic liver disease, 20% increased risk for suicide in Appalachia, 65% increased risk for overdose, and overall that factors out to about 37% increased risk. And then by age, it's higher across the board. For younger folks, looks like about 15% increased risk. That's just this number right here, 15, and then 55%, and then it peaks out at 59% for the 35 to 44-year-old group. Now, what do we have in Appalachia? A lot of non-minority folks, right? Historically, folks working in mining, working in timber industry, lower education, a whole lot of disability, right? It's all factored in together. So I wanted to focus a bit on Tennessee, and I'll tell you where the Tennessee data is coming from. This is coming from the State Epidemiology Outcomes Working Group, and that is these are data people from the different divisions in the state that they have data that they report out, and then they meet in a room about every 2 months, and then think about how they can best inform policy. I'm one of the external members, one of the 2 external or 3 external members that's not on the a state cabinet person, but the intention of all of the SEOW is to get data to be useful to people and stakeholders. So we did something in 2017 called the Heroin Indicators Report, and these are just some highlights from that report. This is actually a screenshot of the dashboard, the Tennessee Drug Overdose Data Dashboard, which you can access, anybody can access. In fact, you can access this other report as well. It's just on Tennessee Department of Health website. Just Google a couple of words that sound like this and you'll find it. We had 1,631 overdose deaths in Tennessee in 2016. That's the latest data that we have. And you can see that the rate's increasing. We actually, our rate is increasing at a higher rate than the national rate. The national rate's increasing at about 9% per year. We're increasing about 11% per year. this is what our local figure looks like. This is actually, we did this for our certificate of need application for the methadone clinic, just to illustrate how bad the problem was, and we did it on the same CDC page where I made those other maps. But so this one's back to 20 per 100,000, and basically all of our counties are higher than 20 per 100,000 that are in our catchment area. We cited our clinic about right there. We did it for a reason. We wanted to be centrally located. It's actually about right there. We wanted to be centrally located with population in that region. There were no methadone options in the entire region. Previous to opening that clinic in Gray, there were 12 methadone clinics in the state. Closest one, there's actually 2 in Knoxville. Closest one was in Knoxville, and then the rest are dispersed west from there. The closest one to here is actually in Weaverville. Prior to our opening, it was in Weaverville. It's Forks of the Ivy exit, and it's right off the interstate. You can see it's a little strip mall on the left as you come down off the mountain, and it's a pretty small operation that sees a lot of people, actually. And a lot of people from Tennessee are continuing to go over there. There's a pretty there's a lot of details related to how that works, and I won't get into it now, but we sited our clinic intentionally right in the center of this just for the purpose of access. So anybody know, well, of course you know, milligrams morphine equivalent, MMEs, been going down in the state. That's great. After the advent of the controlled substance monitoring database, which began to really begin to rein all that in, MMEs are going down, and then MME opioids for treatment of addiction are actually going up. That's awesome. 75% increase in MMEs for addiction treatment. And this, this slide will kind of show you what's going on in East Tennessee. We have MMEs. This is an older slide. I want to point this out. Basically, these are milligram morphine equivalents dispensed and reported to the CSMD in 2014. This was sort of the hot spot right here. And whoops, what did I do?
It's touching it.
Oh, okay. And you can see where there's a lot more buprenorphine being prescribed here, right? That's contrary to popular belief. That's a good thing, because if people are suffering from opioid use disorder, they're not going to be in a clinic trying to wrangle drugs from physicians, right? They're going to be going to buprenorphine clinics. And there is a pretty sturdy movement afoot in the state to clamp down on what are some of these outsized practices in the what are called office-based opioid treatment programs, or OBOTs, which are basically Suboxone clinics. So there's a movement to begin regulating them in a much more strict fashion, and that's welcome as far as I'm concerned. Let's slide back here for a second. So opioid prescriptions are decreasing the most in East Tennessee. That's awesome. And this is 2012 on top and 2015 on the bottom. You can see the change in color. Red is bad, white is good, or lower, and that's a very, very good thing. And then you can see in this slide, next one, the percentage of users on a highly daily dose of opioids greater than 90 MMEs per day decreased from 2012 to 2015. That's awesome too, right? So hopefully, so if you think about this like a supply and demand problem, and then potential demand, right? Potential demand are people that could become addicted in the future, right? And if you think about opioid supply, if it's plentiful out there, who knows? You could be, I mean, there could be some kids that kind of slip into this from finding stuff in cabinets and so on. You don't want the supply to be so great that it's necessarily tempting or feeds a market necessarily, right? And as you begin to close some of that down, and then move people out onto therapies that can help them over time, then that's very positive. And yet, our overdose death rate is still going up. Why? Because heroin is backfilling the demand, which we predicted in 2006. So this is basically just illustrating neonatal abstinence syndrome, where the rates are the highest in the state. But this is good news. It's beginning to plateau, and the next slide that I'll show you has most recent. It's the last week of available data for 2017, and the rate has actually gone. Not the rate, but the total number of unique cases of NAS has finally gone down for the first time. So 987 was the number then in 2017. A couple of things I want to point out here. We still have a massive problem in the East. So you can see that here. And neonatal abstinence syndrome is problematic for a whole bunch of reasons. One is we don't know how bad this is for the kids long term. And I can tell you that there are school systems now beginning to grapple with this in the region, right? You know, kids who are beginning to go into kindergarten, going to first, second grade, and their developmental delays are beginning to show up. But the longitudinal studies have just simply not been done on this, and so it has created a massive downstream issue. It's also an issue related to the cost of treatment in the NICU. It's an issue with respect to stigma and moms. It's an issue with respect to Department of Children's Services and all kinds of things. I want to point out a couple of things I think are on your pretest. If you add up East, Northeast, and Sullivan, that's greater than 48. It's 48.2% of the total number of cases in the state. So basically half of all of the NAS. Plus, if you think about it, plus Knoxville, plus another 9%, about closing on 57 or 8% of NAS is from Knoxville to here. Incidentally, this is one reason right here that medication-assisted treatment providers really don't have the best reputation when it comes to policymakers, particularly folks who are thinking about this problem of NAS, because the source of exposure is from medication-assisted treatment about 69% of the time. Now, granted, there could be multiple sources of exposure, and folks who are suffering from opioid use disorder often have all kinds of stories about what's going on with respect to the drugs that they're on and so on. So just keep that in mind. This is a huge source of problem. Opioid-related crimes, highest in small towns and rural areas, and heroin-related crimes are highest in urban areas. You might have expected that. I don't know. And then arrests are highest in East Tennessee, east of Nashville at least. Beginning to decrease some here. Heroin-related arrests continue to increase in counties around urban areas. And if you think about it, so the supply is constrained, like I talked about, from the legal MMEs, effectively, and now cartels are figuring this out. And trust me, the high-intensity drug trafficking area, right in here and right in here. I mean, there's all kinds of cartels that figured this out.
You can see where the freeways are.
Yeah, that's right. There's population centers too. It's exactly right. A lot of heroin these days, and then fentanyl-laced heroin. Well, we'll talk about that in a few minutes. Hospitalizations for heroin are higher in the West and higher for opioid poisonings in the East. You may go back to that one. Okay, and then you guys all have access to all these slides. And then treatment admissions for heroin are urban, while for opioids, they're rural. And the last couple of slides from the heroin indicators. This is basically, the curves are always going up. Methadone, so the reason methadone is flat or decreasing is methadone prior to this was often used for pain, right, in pain management clinics. And so when you dispense methadone in pain management, you can dispense methadone pills, right, like a bottle of them. And they were getting out on the street and being worried, and that was leading to an overdose deaths from methadone. Most methadone at this point is coming out of opioid treatment programs, which are highly regulated, dispensed, and then the patient is observed consuming the methadone and throwing the cup away. So it's like at our clinic in Gray, that actually is incredibly regulated. We have two different approval bodies that we have to go through just to be open. They have to be licensed by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, as well as the State Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services. And then we'll also get CARF accreditation this coming year. But for the most part, the rest of these are all going up. All drug overdoses are going up. All opioids with benzos, which is a big problem. Co-prescribing with benzos has also been a huge problem out of Suboxone clinics. You've probably run into some of that in your practice. And then treatment admissions for injection drug use are increasing. So all drug injections are going up except for MMEs, basically from pharmacies. Couple of points I want to make about that, actually. Injection drug users in what is effectively state-run treatment, which is the indigent care population. They're largely in East Tennessee for ID or persons who inject drugs. And now I want to get into this. So does anybody know when I say Scott County, Indiana? All right, one person. All right. Scott County, Indiana. Super poor county in Indiana, lowest ranking in many cases. It's across the border up in Indiana from Louisville. Basically, kind of fits the same sort of profile that McDowell County would, or some of the others that we've been talking about. So 19% poverty, 9% unemployed. In late 2014, 3 new HIV cases showed up. Only 5 in the previous 10 years. So folks began looking into it, and then they discovered, guess what? There's a massive epidemic underway. 210 cases when the whole epidemic swept through, and 210 cases. You can see that was late 2014. It's right in here, 2014. There's 5 right there, and then boom. Then CDC kind of came in and started doing contact tracing and started doing all kinds of syringe service programs, everything. So we'll talk about in just a second. But that's what an epidemic curve looks like. That is secondary to basically Opana. Opana ER was being crushed and injected at scale. It was being prescribed, dispensed, and consumed at scale. And so they did intensive contact tracing, HIV testing. That's what the curve looked like. This is the demographics. So this was largely white population. Median age was 30. Well, median age looks like 34. A little bit majority male. 96% injection drug use. 88% injection of Opana ER. This is the network. Effectively, the people in the center, these guys had contacts with a lot of people, right? These people at this very, very center. The larger the dot, the more contacts, and you can see all the lines coming off of them. And then there were other types of relationships like out in here. This person was connected to this person was connected here, right? And then these people weren't connected. So you just kind of see what that network looked like. They responded to the outbreak, had major logistical challenges, a lot of distrust. The syringe service programs were not permitted by state law. There was no outpatient HIV or HCV care available in the community. Insufficient treatment services. Stigma was a problem. But Governor Pence at the time said, hey, this is a public health emergency, and we're going to authorize emergency implementation of syringe services. And they did that and basically began to stamp out the problem. Now, I'm telling you guys this because, as you'll see in a moment, there are places in Appalachia that look very much like this that are very much susceptible to an HCV HIV outbreak at the same scale. So they did the syringe service programs. A lot of syringes went out. A couple of key findings. Most participants reported multiple injections per injection episode, like 2 to 4 injections per single episode. And then they used rinse shots as well to get all the drug out, right? Injecting up to 10 times a day, 35 total injections a day. Often shared a quarter of a pill with 2 to 4 injection partners, and so multiple opportunities for cross-contamination of injection equipment. And I'll just let you read this. Multiple injections per injection episode. You can just, this is what this gentleman was saying about injection. 3 shots, right there, just a quarter of a pill. Most people buy a whole pill and they do a quarter at a time. Sometimes 4 people will be splitting it. They'll mix the rinse. And so when you talk about this disorder, think about it in terms of folks are in some ways lose a lot of volitional control when they're going through withdrawal symptoms, right? And so the motivation to do this, even though most people know the harm, right? They or the potential harm, they will still do it anyway. That's a lot of potential vein abuse and risk. So this is syringe under a microscope. Use 1 time, use 6 times. So after 30 plus times, you're talking about a lot of abuse, and just a lot of ways that a lot of viruses can hang out on the jagged surface. So these are the vulnerable counties and location of syringe service programs in the U.S. Now I want to point out how much they are not related to each other. The vulnerable counties analysis was done by the CDC. Basically, they said the top 5% of counties in the U.S. most at risk for the next HIV outbreak related to syringe sharing between people are these pink counties. And then the legal syringe service programs in the U.S. are in green. This is in 2015. We find there was sort of a gray site, if you will, in Nashville. Everybody left it alone. At this point, the state has legalized syringe service programs, and there's even an infrastructure development opportunity for places for funding for places that's available from the state. So this is just a couple of screenshots of hepatitis C. This is acute hepatitis C in 2009, and that was 0.4 to 0.5 per 100,000. That was our state rate at the time, and this is the 2015 map, and this is our rate at this point is 1 to 11 per 100,000 in 2015. There are other risks from injection that come about, and this study actually was the news story for it was just released yesterday. His team from Vandy found a 60% higher risk of contracting pneumonia and meningitis over non-opioid users. All right? So there's all kinds of downstream problems, and you guys are on the front lines, and you have to just sort of acknowledge it for what it is, and then meet it with as much knowledge and compassion as you possibly can, because there are a lot of people that are going to be coming through your clinics that are suffering from the problem. Let's go into fentanyl for a few moments, and then I think I'm about done. Fentanyl is making its way into the U.S., and it's at this point there are a lot of people that actually prefer fentanyl and fentanyl-laced heroin because of the potency of the high. In the perverse economy of the drug trade, what happens is if there is an overdose in a community, folks are like, really? There's some pretty good heroin then, right? Pretty high heroin. And so that becomes known, and then the market value of that heroin can go up. That is part of what's driving this problem at this time. So you can just see this blue line right here, synthetic opioids are the methadone. This is really the fentanyl line. And that's why you see headlines like this. This was in Huntington, 26 overdoses reported Monday evening. There was a similar kind of headline the following weekend in Cincinnati, is 100 people, and it just goes on and on and on. And that's why we focus on Narcan distribution, and co-prescribing, as well as Narcan accessibility. And with respect to fentanyl, it just takes a little bit, and to be very, very dangerous. So I'm going to leave it to my colleagues in future presentations to kind of go over our model for how we tackle this. I won't really go into it here, but I do want to share one more thing with you. We do have a working group on campus that meets monthly on this. We meet every second Tuesdays of the month from 4 to 5:30 on campus and off campus. But if you're on the lists, email list, you know where we're going to be. There's 240 plus people on the email list at this point, and about 20 to 40 people come every month. There's a meeting today from 4 to 5:30. It's basically just engaged people on the opioid problem in the region. So it could be an engaged buprenorphine prescriber. It could be somebody from an abstinence-only clinic. It could be, Frontier Health is usually there. Mountain States people are there. Ballot Health people are there. It could be health educators, coalition leaders, whatever. Basically, the meetings, usually about half the meeting goes, people just introducing themselves, and then connections being made. It's really good if you're interested in this problem and want something else to do. I'm sure you do as residents and med students and faculty, but anyway, I would invite you to that. It's an open meeting. You don't have to tell us you're coming or whatever, and just the purpose of it is just to find connections with people who are trying to do something on the problem. A lot of good stuff's come out of it, and we've learned a lot of lessons. I don't want to go into all that. I do want to show you this, though. The same guys who did this stuff in Pitt did some data for me and pointed out what was happening in Tennessee. This is where that 11% growth per year in overdose deaths comes from, and how many people we can expect to lose in Tennessee over the next 5 years. It's about 11,000. And then these are the local county numbers, and just how much they've increased over the past couple of years. So just what the curves look like there. Then the last thing is, I put this in as extra data, but I'll just go ahead and show you. This is just basically what happened with the epidemic and how it grew. And so just kind of keep your eye on Appalachia. So here you go. I went past my last slide, but I won't bother to go back. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have, and thanks for your attention.
Thank you.